Welcome back to the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. I'm Joe Noga, joined by Paul Hoynes. Hoynesy, what we had talked about yesterday came to pass on the off day here for the Guardians. The Guardians announcing that they had released veteran first baseman Carlos Santana in what, his 10th season with the Guardians, 10th overall, I think, in Major League Baseball. Santana's numbers had started to slip as playing time was being given away to younger players like Kyle Manzardo and CJ Kayfus. What was your reaction when you found out that Carlos Santana has played his last game for the Guardians?
I was sad. I saw it coming. I'm sure Carlos saw it coming, especially, when Vogt said his playing time was going to be reduced when the team was in Texas over the weekend. With the way the club is playing, he's 39 years old. They have two young players that they want to get more playing time to. So, two and two makes four in this case. So yeah, but I was sad to see him go. He's been here for a long time. This is, as we've said yesterday, this is a really good player that I don't think people really appreciated fully. Big power hitter, good defensive first baseman, a little more versatile than people thought. We go back to the 2016 World Series when he was playing the outfield at Wrigley Field. I remember Manny Acta, who was in town this weekend as the bench coach for Seattle. Manny was managing Cleveland when they made the trade for Santana. And when he came up in 2010, he put him right in the middle of the lineup. And basically, that's where he stayed his whole career. Manny said, this is a guy that's going to hit between 280, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs. He was off a little bit with the batting average, but home runs and RBIs pretty close. For a 15, 16-year career, this guy, he was a real deal. And I hope if Carlos wants to keep playing, he can hook on with another team and end this season, maybe in a postseason race, or he comes back next year. But whatever happens to him, he's had a great career.
Yeah, and really a first class individual as well. I thought it was a poignant sort of moment for me in the clubhouse yesterday after the game as we're interviewing Will Wilson, and you sort of stepped out of the interview and made sure that as Santana was leaving the clubhouse, you went over and shook his hand because this is a guy that you've been around a long time, and we always sort of refer to you as the Carlos Santana whisperer. You were the guy who could approach Carlos at any time and get a good quote out of him. So yeah, it's just important to see that relationship there too. And I think, like we mentioned yesterday, the fans sort of being robbed of the opportunity to give him a standing ovation at some point. Not doing it with on an off day before he could play his last game or make his last appearance. It just sort of it doesn't sit right with me, but I know it's one of those business of baseball things, and the move had to be made in the way it did. You mentioned just the numbers, and we talked about how the sneaky numbers last year and all that, but or yesterday and all that. But you got to look at where he ranks. What all-time switch hitter home runs? 35. He ranks eighth all-time behind Mickey Mantle, Eddie Murray, and a bunch of guys who were in the Hall of Fame. All-time walks, 1,330 walks. I think he was ahead of Tim Raines, and right behind Eddie Murray on that all-time list. Number 9 on the active players list for all-time home runs at 335. So hits, 7th place on the active list, 1878, 403 doubles, 34 RBIs. Just some important numbers, and the work that he did here in Cleveland will certainly be a guy that we're going to watch enshrined in the Guardians Hall of Fame. Hopefully, he gets some consideration, stays on the ballot for a while by the baseball writers if this is the end for him, and he waits long enough to be considered there. So. A great career, but a special time, a special player for Cleveland. Can't forget him dropping to his knees in front of that first base dugout in Toronto in 2016 to catch the final out of the ALCS and send Cleveland to the World Series. That was a special moment, I'm sure, for everybody.
And we never found out who kept that ball, Joe. I don't think Carlos. That's probably sitting on Carlos's mantelpiece, either in Miami or the Dominican Republic, wherever he put that. But we never found out what happened. What happened to the last out of that game? But I'm pretty sure it's in Carlos's possession. And Joe, this is a guy that, when he first came to Cleveland, he kind of, he had trouble fitting in and he rubbed some people the wrong way. There was, a player told me this guy's got to be traded because he doesn't get it. Um, eventually in 2016, I think when Tito Francona came in, he was a big influence on Carlos. And in 2016, you really saw this guy turn around. He was upset that he was going to have to share time with Mike Napoli at first base and DH. Napoli and him sat down, mapped out the problem, and settled things. They went to Francona with it. Francona was fine with the timeshare with the two positions, and they hit over 60 home runs, and I think each drove in 100 runs. So it was a great relationship, and I think that was a turning point for Carlos. He really became, a team player, a good teammate, and a leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah, he went on to be more of a leader from that point, and you saw when he went to Philadelphia, the leadership he showed there in the clubhouse, and sort of bring a calming aspect to that clubhouse at that time. And then when he came back to Cleveland, it was that was sort of his I don't want to say prime, but those were some good years. He was an All-Star in 2019, participated in the home run derby in the 2019 All-Star game here in Cleveland. So just a guy who's going to be very, very well regarded by this organization for a long time, and just his contributions were will not go unnoticed. All right, let's move forward. I guess the big question that this move sort of brings up is, what's the future for the Guardians at the first base position? You had, Josh Naylor was there for several years. You traded Naylor, brought in Carlos Santana. I think everybody sort of recognized that as a stopgap measure, probably a 1-year deal. And now that, you're looking forward to the future, you've got CJ Kayfus, you've got Kyle Manzardo. One's probably a little ahead of the other in terms of defensively at the first base, but both of them swing the bat from the left side. Is it between the two of them to sort of maybe have a Mike Napoli and Carlos Santana come together moment about sharing time at first base? Or, really both of them are so early on and so young in their careers that they're pretty much going to play when the manager tells them.
Exactly. Because, Santana and Napoli were veterans. Tito always loved to have, that one veteran in the room. Napoli was it, and they got that thing worked out. But I would think, Vogt is going to keep using Manzardo and Kuyfus just like he is. And, Kuyfus has a little more versatility than Manzo because he can go out and play right field and left field. So, that gives him a few more options to play. But I would think, from here on out, Manzardo's got to be in the lineup almost every day at DH or first base. Hopefully he gets a chance to face some more lefties. And, this guy's on a roll, Joe. Not too many guys, what he did, do what he did on Wednesday. He gets his third walk-off hit in one season. Well, that's a valuable guy. I think that's a guy you want to have in your lineup.
Yeah, I think this sort of, maybe we see a different Kyle Manzardo in the final month of the season here, knowing that he doesn't have to worry when he comes to the ballpark every day, am I going to play? He knows he's going to play. He knows he's going to be in there, and you can go from that point. Do you like one or the other ahead of one defensively? Is we haven't really seen too much of Kayfus defensively at first base. He's also played in right field. And don't forget, you've also got David Fry coming back next year. He's going to be a right-handed option who can play first base. And you want to talk about versatility, that's sort of David Fry's calling card. So that's sort of where the evolution of the rotation and the mix is going to go. Two lefty swinging bats from that side of the plate, David Fry on days when you're facing a tough lefty. But like you said, Kyle Manzardo going to be in there pretty much every day.
Yeah, I do not know. I hate to make a judgment on Kuyfus because, like you said, Joe, I don't think we've seen enough of him at first base. I like his versatility. He's made some nice plays over there. But I've seen Manzardo get a little better, too. I mean, Manzardo still has some problems it looks like pop-ups going down the line, foul pops. So he's got to work on that a little bit. But, I think that he can work on that. Right now, I think it's probably a toss-up to who's the better defensive player, and without me seeing Kuyfus a lot, that's all I can say.
It's probably a question to ask Ruglis Odor, Kai Correa, the guys that work every day with those guys out at first base. We see them when we go stand out by the dugout after talking to Stephen Vogt. We're on the field and they're hitting ground ball after ground ball after ground ball to these guys. You're wearing out the infield that way, just the amount of work that they put in. So it's not for lack of work that's being put in for sure. And don't forget David Fry again. We're back, I believe it was a Yankee game last season when he made one of the best plays I think of the year defensively on a double play ball that it was chopped to first. He threw home to Bo Naylor, and Bo Naylor threw back to him at first base. I thought it was just for a guy who doesn't play there every day, instinctively and all that it was outstanding. So I think they're in good hands. And beyond, Kefis and Manzardo, you've got Ralphie Velasquez, a former #1 pick for the organization, who just recently moved up to Double-A Akron. And you want to talk about a guy who's tearing the cover off the ball. Ralphie's having himself a heck of a year between Lake County and Akron. What his OPS right now on the season is 842, 21 home runs, 72 RBIs. But just since arriving in Akron, 13 games, he's got a 1200 OPS, 4 home runs, 9 RBIs, 373 batting average. This is a 20-year-old kid. And you want to talk about the future of first base in Cleveland, he might be it.
That's those are big numbers. We saw this guy in spring training. He's enthusiastic. He came up as a catcher. They drafted him as a catcher. I think he was almost too big to catch, Joe. He kept getting hurt behind the plate, so they moved him to first base, and he's really taken to the position. He was a team leader on his team in high school, and I think he's got that same kind of personality. But the big thing is the pop, Joe. He's got some power. It's legitimate power. The Eastern League is a hard league to hit in. And, he's kind of come up there and hasn't missed a beat.
Yeah, and an impressive prospect. And also, they've tried him out in the outfield a little bit as well at points last year, I know for sure. I think he played some in that spring breakout game in the outfield. So, yeah, a guy who, again, you could be talking about him in a couple of years. Only 20 years old, though, so it might be a little while before you're hearing the name Ralphie Velasquez at the major league level. All right, Hoynes, this weekend, we alluded to it a little bit. It's the big 1995 30th anniversary weekend. They've got more than 30 Guardians alumni players in town for the series against the Mariners, which kicks off Friday night. The majority of those players were members of that 1995 team. You've got Tommy, Baerga, Kenny Lofton, Tony Pena, Alvaro Espinoza, some of the great characters and personalities on that club. Charlie Nagy is here. Sandy Ellimer, obviously, with the ball club all the time. So they had their alumni golf outing at Firestone Country Club in Akron today. Tommy and Carlos Baerga driving around on a golf cart, greeting the participants in the golf outing and sort of acting as the emissaries there, which I'm sure they both loved. Tomorrow's going to be a big night, a special night at the ballpark. They're going to have a roundtable discussion at the new Terrace Beer Hall, and that's by invitation only for some season ticket holders. It's going to be moderated by Tom Hamilton, and you'll see videos of that coming out, I'm sure, on the broadcast channel for months and years to come. They're going to talk about the 95 season. Mike Hargrove will be there. He's going to participate in the pregame lineup exchange before the opener against the Mariners on Friday. Of course, he managed both clubs, and those are the two clubs that met in the ALCS that year to decide who was going to go on to face Atlanta in the World Series. Then Cleveland came out ahead 4-2 in that one. Charlie Nagy will throw out the ceremonial first pitch to Sandy Alomar on Friday night. And then they wrap it all up with Rock and Blast, the best fireworks show of the season on Friday and Saturday night.
That's going to be a great event, Joe. That 95 team will always have a special place in Cleveland's heart. It doesn't matter what happens after that. They keep coming back to Cleveland, and Cleveland can't get enough of them. That ended 41 years of frustration, that 95 team. In a strike-shortened season, they go 144. I mean, if they had played 162 games, who knows how many games they would have won. That put them back in the postseason. It was the Jacobs Field, Pressett Field was still young. It was like the sky was the limit for that team, and they were loaded. It was just the makeup of that team They had great hitters. They had veteran pitchers. They had young guys. They had old guys. The chemistry was great, and Grover did a great job managing that club because there was a lot of talent on that club and a lot of egos on that club, and Hargrove managed it beautifully.
And can you still name the lineup? Can you still go 1 through 9?
Yeah, I what Lofton, Vizquel, Baerga, Bell, Eddie Murray, maybe Manny Ramirez or
Mm-hmm.
Manny, maybe Tomey. Let's see, Sorrento
Mm-hmm.
and Alomar. I'm probably missing
Yep.
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. That was it. That was the 9. Ironically enough, you think back to that line. We see it on the T-shirts. We see all the, the sort of every time videos are shown about what a killer lineup that was. And they had guys like Wayne Kirby and Dave Winfield was on that roster as well. There was a lot of depth and versatility as well on that club.
Yeah, Ruben Amaro was on that
Hmm.
club. Espinoza, like you said, Wayne Kirby, who was really a good player, lost his job to Manny Ramirez. They had, like we said, Tony Pena and Alomar, I think were split the job. Or maybe, yeah, they split the catching.
Yeah.
I just remember them, in spring training that year, '95. It was the replacement spring, and the veterans,
Right.
the real players didn't come back until April, till the strike was settled, and that's when they brought Oral Hershiser in, and all of a sudden you see Oral Hershiser in Winter Haven, Florida, and you're wondering how did he get here, and they just. They really, did John Hart, Hank Peters, Danny O'Dowd, Mark Shapiro. They did a great job building that roster and, just getting the right ingredients because, that organization at that point, Joe, they had Brian Giles and Richie Sexton, and they couldn't get a sniff of the big leagues. And both
Right.
those guys, I think, maybe went on to hit close to maybe more than 300 home runs with different teams because they couldn't play. They couldn't
Right.
play in that lineup.
Right. And you think back, name that we left off, but Jose Mesa,
Yeah.
that 95 season was his, almost a Cy Young season for Jose Mesa out of the
He
bullpen.
finished second, I
What,
think, second in the
what
Cy Young
30
voting.
36 consecutive saves.
Yeah,
He
and what did he
was
go? 44 for 45, I think, maybe
something
right
like
around.
that. I mean, he
Yeah,
was Emmanuel Clase before Emmanuel Clase
yeah,
was
yeah.
Emmanuel Clase. So, and had sort of a similar downfall, but who knows? It'll be great to see everybody back at the ballpark, and I'm sure it'll be a lot of special moments for fans this weekend. Seattle in town, obviously. A big series for the Guardians' current team, just because, like you said, 5 games out of the wild card, currently held by Seattle, that third place in the wild card standings. Bottom line is the Guardians need to sweep this series. Otherwise, you can kiss any sort of playoff hopes goodbye. They come in with Cal Raleigh having 50, 51 home runs, record for a catcher. They've got, clicking on all cylinders basically, but Josh Naylor has been the guy that they picked up and sort of sparked their offense as well. What are you expecting to see this weekend from Seattle when they arrive at Progressive Field?
That team is loaded, Joe. They went and helped themselves at the deadline with Naylor. They are not an offensive juggernaut though. They're built around pitching a lot like Cleveland, but they're 11th in runs. There's 20. With their 241 batting average, so that's 20 ranks first. OPS, they're 12th, against, the Guardians who have, negative run differential of 55. They're 30th in batting average, 29th in OPS, and 28th in runs scored. Offensively, Seattle has the edge, and we're going to see. We'll see the Guardians. I mean, the Guardians are going to see Kirby, Gilbert, and Bryce Miller from their rotation. I think it should be a good series. The last 10 games between these two teams, they've split. They've gone 5-5. In June, Seattle went 3-0, swept Cleveland in Seattle. You were at that series. What
Mm-hmm.
what stood out to you about that Seattle team?
The major takeaway from that series was thank goodness for 1/8 of an inch of rounded plastic
Yeah.
on and Cade Smith's the bill of his cap, because we almost lost the man on a line drive back to the box by Rowdy Tellez, who is no longer with Seattle, but just yeah, just they overwhelmed them offensively is what I saw in Seattle, and that it's all signs point to they could do it again here in Cleveland. It all depends on who shows up in terms of the rotation. Logan Allen, Gavin Williams, Tanner Bybee lined up to face the Mariners this weekend. Hoynes, that's going to bring an end to today's edition of the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. We will be back next week to talk about Boston and the weekend series against the Mariners.
Deal, Joe.